Good afternoon, everyone. It's David Schlotthauer here, back with another detailed tropical weather outlook and discussion for Wednesday, August 28th, 2024. So here's a look at the latest GOES 16 True Color Visible Satellite Imagery provided by Dr. Levi Cowan at tropicaltidbits.com. Link in the description below this video. And as we do take a look here at the imagery, we do have an area to watch out here entangled within the intertropical convergence zone. Until this gets detached, we won't see a whole lot of stability amongst the models at showing tropical development with this, but it's an area that we really need to watch. There's another area coming off of Africa that the NHC will probably soon be monitoring as this moves off of Africa and then generally moves off to the northwest and even towards the west-northwest. But that wave should miss the islands of the Windward Islands for the given time frame, but not the first wave. That's going to be a different story. Now, taking a look at the latest 7-day graphical tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida. As we can see here, we do have a couple of areas to watch right now in the Atlantic Basin. First of all, our most important one for a lot of you all that live on the U.S. British Virgin Islands, Guadeloupe, Martinique, Dominica, also some of these other islands here to the north, including for Puerto Rico. This area of disturbed weather has a 20% chance of tropical development, all right? An area of disorganized showers and thunderstorms over the central Atlantic is associated with a tropical wave, all right? Some slow development is possible as the system moves generally westward at about 10 to 15 miles an hour. So we really have to watch this one, but our other area to its northwest has a 0% chance of tropical development. So now, with that being said, the question really remains, will this tropical wave that is closest to the Windward and Leeward Islands develop into anything significant? There is still a lot of murkiness in the modeling today's forecast on the 12Z outputs from the Euro, the Canadian, the Icon, and the GFS model. There is no concrete answer if or if not this is going to develop. I know a lot of people are assuming that this is not going to develop. This is not going to impact anyone at all. I would really be careful because we still do not know yet, especially when we have an area of disturbed weather that is entangled within the intertropical convergence zone. And models do not handle these equations very well at all. Think about a numerical model. It uses mathematical equations to predict the state of the atmosphere from its initialization, which was ran at 12Z this morning. So I want to clear up the confusion there with that. So what we're looking at here is a European model first, and then we'll look at the GFS, the Canadian, the Icon models. Okay, so we're just going to kind of go one by one to show you the realm of possibilities here, and then look at our spaghetti plots thereafter. So looking at the lower levels of the atmosphere here, this is at 850 millibars. So this is at 5,000 feet above the surface. These darker red colors indicate vorticity, how much spin there is in the atmosphere. So you could take notes if you want during the video and write down that vorticity is spin in the atmosphere. All right, and so this is my favorite level of the layer of the atmosphere that I like to look at. So now going out to 2 days, this is for Friday morning, August the 30th, the second to last day. Again, this area of spin over here, this is stretched. Okay, we're seeing vorticity stretching on this model. And so it remains to be seen what part of this concentrates. Does this spin up over here? Does this spin up over here? Does this, the furthest east vort max, able to spin up something? So until we get consistency, until we get a better clear answer and coherency on these models, there's going to be a lot of wild outcomes. You might see some runs showing a major hurricane and others are not showing anything at all. We're in that time on the modeling right now. There's a lot of complex situations going on, and models don't do good with those. Here's this tropical wave that is coming off of Africa, and the reason why this is more modeled better is because it's circular. It's not stretched along the intertropical convergence zone here. So now when we go out to day 5, what ends up happening is that eventually some area of this intertropical convergence zone ends up spinning up something. We can see a little bit of orange here on our vorticity plot. And then there's, again, that tropical wave that is, again, coming off of Africa right now. So the second wave, again, because it's circular and it has a more ball of energy, models resolve that a lot better than, say, something that is kind of stretched like Laffy Taffy. Okay, so that's 5 days out. This is for Monday morning, September the 2nd. And then, of course, let's zoom in here so I can show you all. This is that Vort max. All right, so even so, okay, it's not going to be a tropical depression or a tropical storm, but it's going to be an area of disturbed weather. Moving over Dominica, Guadeloupe, Martinique, yes, gusty winds, some heavy rainfall, some inclement weather is expected over these islands with any tropical wave. That is impacts. You can get a lot of rainfall from a tropical wave if it is energetic enough. All right. Once we go forward, though, the system does not develop very well because it moves into some deep layer shear. And of course, that is to be expected over the Caribbean. But once this reemerges or might move into the Gulf of Mexico, we'll see with what happens there. But that's just on one model. If we look at the GFS model, the GFS has not been very good either with this situation. And we can see why that is. You can see the latest GFS here out to day 5 for Monday morning. There is our same vorticity plot right there moving over these islands. Again, a very weak signal from both the GFS and the ECMWF model. And then what ends up happening is this wave does not really disintegrate, but then the backside of that wave re-energizes. So we can see here some Vort maxes picking up. And then look what happens. We might get a more sharper trough here. And does that develop into something more intense? We will have to wait and see if that happens. But you can see the Euro is way over here with that envelope of spin versus the GFS is way over here out to 10 days. And seriously, folks, with not much activity within that ITCZ with spin, models are going to do some pretty funky things. I don't want to sound like I was cussing there. It's going to do some weird things with the wave. Just simply, it's not going to resolve things very well. So understand that. You may see a lot of instability, inconsistency with these models. Now, the Canadian model is on the whole side of extremes here. When we go forward, we can see, again, this area of spin like we talked about, this Vort max that's just kind of stretched thin. Something really develops. The eastern side of that Vort max tends to spin up, and then that's why it goes a little further north. So when we go and look a little closer in here at the Caribbean, there's a more better coherent circulation here. You can see the dark red indicating cyclonic vorticity moving over Jamaica here. This would be a more extreme scenario, but a possibility. I want to be careful with what I say here. Realm of possibility. And then you can see out to day 10, we have a hurricane, maybe a major hurricane off the Florida coast. So in other words, the European model is over here. The GFS model is over here. The Canadian model is over here. So you can see between the 3 different models, we have different outcomes. Same thing on the Icon model. Here's a look at the wind forecast. Same thing. Developing the system pretty late. If we zoom in, this is a little past the 5 to 7 day time frame. Actually, this is day 7. We can see the envelope here of energy, that tropical wave that is located. If we go out and look at, say, the 500 millibar Vort max, you can see there is spin there over the next 7.5 to 8 days. And again, you can see it's way over here versus the other models. So there's a lot to iron out here. Even so, it may look like it's not going to develop. We really got to average things out here. And you just cannot sleep on each of these tropical waves. You just can't because of, well, we're in that favorable or somewhat favorable conducive environment. It is late August. Historically, this is a huge ramp up in the Atlantic hurricane season. And we don't sleep on these things because, you know, this time of the year, these things are for sure to get organized and fly very significantly. So now looking at the European deep layer moisture plot, brown colors indicate lots of drier air. Teal green colors indicate a lot more moisture in the deep layers of the atmosphere. So this is from about 10,000 feet to about 32,000 feet. And When we go forward, you can see there's that tropical wave, and yes, there is moisture here, rain, some gusty winds, that sort of business. And then as we go forward, that tropical wave moves into the Caribbean, but we'll see. Does it move into the Gulf? We shall wait and get an idea once these models get more consistent. Now, another thing to keep in mind, there is some semblance of shear here in the Caribbean. Now, it may not seem like much on the upper level wind chart that we're looking at here, with very light winds here, nothing too extreme, winds about 5 to 10 knots at that level. But again, wind shear is a wind direction change with height. So if we simply look at our lower levels of the atmosphere, it's going to show us a different story. Yes, we have easterly winds here, similar to Beryl. Yeah, upper level winds over Beryl were very favorable, but, well, the low level easterly jet that cut across into the Caribbean allowed Beryl to weaken because that induced a westerly shear on the system. So in this case, we have stronger winds at the surface here in the lower levels at about 25 to 30 knots. And if we look at the upper levels of the atmosphere, there is very little wind at all. So this is actually a westerly shear moving across the Atlantic. And what I mean by that, we look at the wind shear forecast, you can kind of get the net value here. Again, because strong winds at the surface, light winds at top, that's westerly shear. If we had easterly winds aloft, then this shear would be very light and flat, but instead we're not seeing that here. So some complications in the forecast ahead of this disturbance once it gets into the Caribbean, or if it does at all. Now, what are the chances of tropical development with each category? Well, this is a look at the European ensemble forecast, probabilistic of tropical depression type winds within the next about 10 days. We can see here, there is this area that I circle in here. There is a 30 to 40% chance of tropical development here over the northeastern Caribbean. So not entirely not going to happen type deal. There is some chances here. Looking at the tropical storm type chances with winds greater than 34 knots or about 38, 39 miles an hour, there is a 10 to 20% chance over the Dominican Republic, over Jamaica, as well as over Puerto Rico. So yeah, any areas that I circled in black here definitely need to be watching this system. Let's not sleep on it, folks, assuming that this is not going to develop at all. Even so, you might think that, oh, David, there's a lot of dry air, there's a lot of wind shear. You know, you just can't rely on one model and think, I'm safe. This is not going to develop. You watch, David, it's not going to develop. We don't know that. How about that? How does that sound? Okay. So now, the reason why there is still the potential for development here is if we look at our numerical deterministic forecast from the weathernerds.org website, we can see the spaghetti plot. Yes, this is that wave that we're watching, and there are still some runs producing, sniffing out strong tropical storm intensity here over the northeastern Caribbean and into the southwestern Atlantic. So we cannot rule that out entirely. And then, of course, our second wave out here is probably going to end up going northwest anyways. So, but now that's right now. We'll see if that actually manages to get further west. But right now, it doesn't look very much likely on our ensembles. Now, looking at the European ensemble, all 51 members here that run this ensemble forecast, a range of possible outcomes. There's our tropical wave right here developing. And you can still see there are some members here, folks. Still some members indicating at least tropical depression or tropical storm intensity. There's one member here showing a major hurricane, which right now, very unlikely that's going to happen for the time being, but at least a named storm system is on the possibility deck of cards as we go into early part of September. Not that it will develop or won't develop, but again, there is still that signal there, and that's why we're not sleeping on this just yet. Now, the reason why we don't sleep on these tropical waves is that the water temperatures over the Caribbean, the southwestern Atlantic, and the Gulf of Mexico are running very warm this time of the year, warmer than average, with sea surface temperatures that are in the mid to upper 80s, close to 90 degrees still in the Gulf of Mexico. So while it doesn't look like there will be development now, models again are having a hard time until this lodges free of the intertropical convergence zone. Where and when that will happen, we don't know quite yet, but probably in the next 5 or so days. Looking at sea surface temperature anomalies, again, really far above average here over the Caribbean, over the Gulf of Mexico, and the southwest Atlantic. The North Atlantic really warm actually in the subtropics here of the Azores, running well above average for this time of the year. But anyways, if you found this video very helpful and informative, please consider subscribing if you haven't already, folks. Please share this with your family and friends on social media, because you're going to hear a lot about this on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, that, oh, this is not going to really develop. Not to worry about that. I'm not saying that this won't develop or it will develop, but right now, because of the uncertainty, everyone is going to assume that this is not going to develop. So please be sure you do share this with your family and friends on social media, because after all, it is late August, and you know what could happen in late August and early September. We're getting ready for the meat of the hurricane season, the peak time, September the 10th, and things could go very crazy very quickly. But that's going to do with today's detailed tropical weather outlook and discussion. Share, like, and subscribe, and I'll be back with you more tomorrow.